Art do's and don'ts. Let's get into it. I had an energy drink and a chai latte yesterday, and I still feel it. I had the chai latte way too late, but at least I don't have to buy a new one today. Okay, so do's and don'ts. First of all, I hope you're doing the homework in the sense of actually making the album, writing the book, or the outline, but by now you should be writing the book, making the art projects, because this, if you've not watched part 1 till 9, start with part 1. This will be a playlist, so go to my channel, look up the playlist, start from part 1, work your way through. If you're super motivated, do one every day, but actually do it, because I don't want this to be one of those things you watch and you're like, yeah, it feels so good learning, and then you do nothing. The goal at the end of this course is that you actually have something to show for it, not for anybody else, but for yourself. That you can look at yourself and be like, I did that. But for you to say, I did that, you're gonna have to do it. So that's the first preface. Second, we're gonna get into the do's and don'ts, but before we do, check out the description. There's my poetry book, my fiction book, my Spotify. I have a new podcast episode out every Friday and a new podcast episode out here every Monday, and videos in between. And my TikTok, where you do all of your homework, and if you want me to react to it, you make a TikTok, you tag me, and I react. If not, you keep it to yourself and you grow. Either one is great. Let's get into it. Do's and don'ts. We had to relocate because the sun was literally in my eyes, and I was like, I don't know why my eyes feel like they're not functioning. Well, maybe because the sun was right in it. So, okay, let's get into it. Do wander and think about the world, but don't be in survival and utility mode. Fear is an emotion that can be explored through art. I always get a random accent at the end of some of my sentences. But you should not be in survival mode. Survival mode very rarely creates art, because it rarely creates anything except stress that is not cohesive, it's very animalistic, and there's something very poetic about animals, but their animalistic tendencies are usually not. I hope you get what I'm saying. Do feel the 3D in sight and see the emotions. So basically, combine senses. I think it's always so cool when someone describes something in different senses than the original thing. Like the colors of how it smelled, or the feeling of how it sounded. These kind of things, combining senses. And you're like, oh, is this only through writing? No. If you have to figure out how that translates into your art form, that is your job. That is your existential homework with all of this, is I can only give you so many metaphors, but you do have to understand your own art form and how to translate that. I can only give you the English version, and then you have to translate it into your own language, which is the art form. Don't pretend humans work on primarily facts. I would argue they don't work on facts at all. They see facts and they have the ability to repeat them through audio, through words. But we don't work on facts. Because facts are slow. Learning something is relatively slow. Feeling something is instant. So it makes sense even evolutionarily. But that's not the point. The point is, don't pretend that humans work on facts. Don't pretend that you work on facts. If I had to have art equals something, what it would equal would be emotions. That would be it. Whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, fear, whatever the feeling is, that is art. Art is feelings, because art is humanity, and humanity is feelings. Yes, there are also logic and logistics and blah, 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 and they absolutely are. But that's not the art of it. That's not the poetic part of it. That's not the connection part of it. I've touched on that in one of the videos before. Art is connection. Do not use a formula and do the same thing again and again and again. Because it might work, but it will feel like shit. You're like, okay, I'll give you a little bit of an example, which is Sabrina Carpenter. Her short and sweet album was great, and she actually did an interview where she said something along the lines of that was her taking on all the criticism of past albums and trying to make like the perfect album. She didn't say perfect, but catering to an audience basically, to an extent. And I loved that album. And now she just released a new one called Man's Best Friend. And I didn't love it at first listen the same way I loved Short and Sweet. But she was talking about that this is an album about second listens, kind of. It's maybe not an album you get at first listen, but you do get it at second listen. It's also an album she cares about if it's listened in one piece, like in a row, how it's supposed to be. And I was like, okay. But then she said something I so agree with. She said, I cannot make the last album again. If you want to hear that album, listen to that album. She didn't say it like that verbatim, but basically, and that is so true. People crave the thing they love, but if you give them something new to love, they can still get the thing they loved. I love Anna Karenina, the book, but if he wrote the same book again, I would be like, yay! And then I would be like, what? I mean, also, he's dead, so if he wrote a new book, I'd also be very surprised. But, of course they loved it. It is great, but that's not where you take your cues from. Because even I, the grand thinker, no, I'm joking. Even I was like, it's not exactly the same. I don't get it the way I got the last album. It's not supposed to be the same. The last album is the last album. You don't recreate an album. It was there. It's great. You can listen to it. You can buy it still. But it's done. That era is done. Nothing else works on repetition. History does not work on repetition. Technology does not work on repetition. People didn't make the iPhone 1 and they were like, you know what we need to do? We need to make the same iPhone 54 more times and call it something different. So don't work on formulas. Don't. Even the basics of like verse, pre-chorus, chorus, sometimes start with a chorus. Now, not this specifically, but in general, this is a metaphor for don't use formulas because life, which art is a reflection of life and life is a reflection of art, does not work on formulas. Even if you do exactly the same thing you did yesterday, you don't get the exact same day. Because either that was the first time you did that day, and so some things were surprising, or there's a change of weather, there's rain, like there's always change, and trying to not change is the most painful thing to try to do. You need to revisit confusing thoughts and concepts. The amount of times I chew over the same thing is insane. Because I've talked about this before, delaying an opinion is so vital. Most people don't delay having an opinion. They have a thought leader in the sense of they have someone they completely copy all of their thoughts from. Check out my first poetry book. It teaches you how to think for yourself, but that's not the point here. And then they don't postpone any opinions. They have the exact same opinions as somebody else. The thing is though, even the most intelligent person is wrong sometimes. I am wrong sometimes. Am I aware I am wrong when I'm wrong? No, I think I'm right, but I might be wrong. Not now. No, not wrong. But, of course I'll be wrong sometimes. Of course, everyone's going to be wrong sometimes. So if you're 100% copying somebody, you're copying their wrongs. That's why, like, copying a test, unless the other person is cheating and, like, has all of the answers perfectly, you're also copying their wrongs. Anyways, that was a little side tangent. But go over confusing thoughts. Go over concepts. The amount of times I've gone over very small, maybe even very simple concepts like unconditional love. And I was like, I don't know if I believe in that. And then I was like, how does anybody believe in that? Because if you unconditionally love something or someone, is that them? Does that make sense? Like if you say, I love this person no matter what, and then this person changes souls with somebody else, Do you love them? Do you love their soul? Like, it has to be dependent on something. And so the conclusion I have formed on unconditional love, after chewing over it quite a bit, is your unconditional love is within the conditions of who the person is. But if they would fundamentally change, their because you might say, well, no, it's their soul. Okay, if their soul is in a dog's body, you don't love them anymore. There are certain conditions, and some people's conditions are far looser than others. That's where people are like, are there conditions? Yes, they're just not the same as yours. Unconditional love is on the conditions of who the person is. Oh, they would never smoke. Oh, they would never do this. Oh, they always do this. And if their fundamental makeup, not like, oh, they wear pink, oh, they wear blue, or whatever, but their fundamental makeup of their personality and their ethics and their morals or whatever would change, then the love would change too. It is predicated on the fundamental conditions. But it is not predicated on superficial conditions. That's why it's called unconditional, because most people see conditions as very tangible. They're this weight, they're this height. Okay, well, you're not going to change height. They're this weight, they have this income, whatever. And so that seems already unconditional because they lost their money. But their fundamentals didn't change. That's my idea of unconditional love. Also a side tangent, but that's fine. But I would have never had this understanding of what I view it as until I sat down and I thought about it, and then I let it go, and I sat down and I thought about it and I let it go, and I had discussions with friends about it, and I just chewed over it and over it and over it. And you might say, okay, how do I do that in my art form if it's not writing? How dare you not be writing? No, I'm joking. Also, I think writing would be good for any art form. In the sense of journaling would probably be good even if you paint, because it just helps you clear up your mind. But anyways, I digress. You might look at the same place over and over and over again. You might look at Sweden, for example, if you're going to paint Sweden or whatever, and you want to encapsulate the culture of Sweden. And you might be like, well, I looked at this one scenery, I don't have an idea, let it go. But then you're like, but I really want to paint Sweden, but I don't know how. You might look at another part of the culture. You might look at the dark sides. You might look at the happy sides. You might look at the children. You might look at the adults. You might look at the dirtiest streets and the cleanest streets. You might listen to different accents, and you might listen to different accents in different languages. And you might listen to the rhythm of the language. Like, there's so many ways you can look at it, and then you can paint that all in one. For example, let's say, this is not true, I don't know Sweden well. I don't know it at all, but there might be a beat to, there's a beat to every language. Now, the beat changes depending on emotion as well, but there's a fundamental beat to a language usually. Like, Spanish is very like, and then there's German who's probably more precise, not all the time, but there's usually a beat to a language. Let's say the beat is 1, 2, 3. Sharps 1, 2, 3. I don't think that's the case, it's just an example. You're like, okay, well, how do I paint 1, 2, 3? You have to figure it out. Do you represent 1, 2, 3 by the moon, the reflection of the moon and the sun? Do you put them nearer to each other? Do you have everything be in threes? Are there always 3 women, 3 men, 3 this, 3 that? You can get so inventive if you just look at it again and again and again. And this is what the internet has definitely robbed us of, is the ability to look at something again and again and again and again, because that's when good thoughts come. It is not, now I know what to write. It is also not, that's why I don't believe in love at first sight, but that's a different tangent. It is not the, and now I shall paint the Mona Lisa. It is looking at the same face again and again. It is looking at the same arrangements again and again. It is looking again and again at the same thing. And you're like, isn't that boring? No, it's not boring. You're trying to find meaning. You're not trying to make a TikTok. You're trying to find something deeper. And sure, for example, I'm assuming people who go diving, it's really fun to start diving. Then there's the middle ground where there's not yet the plants and animals from the deep sea, but there's no real animals there. Like, they are, but you would have seen them higher up, where the deepness is boring. And then you get to the really cool animals on the bottom of the sea. That is thinking. Embrace boredom. But that might have to be a separate video. Have opinions and theories about the world, but be open for them to change. I think having no opinions and theories is impossible. It's like saying don't have biases. I think the best way to deal with biases, I have a video coming up on the most interesting biases, but that's not here nor there at the moment, is not to say I don't have biases. It's not to beat the biases out of you. It is to be aware of the biases that you tend to use. Are you more of a confirmation bias person? Are you more of, oh, I'm a negative person, I tend to lean negative. If you give me neutral information, I am the person who leans negative, or I'm the person who leans too positive. Am I the type of person who believes in others but doesn't believe in myself? It is better to know your biases than pretend you don't have them. It's the same way. It is better to know your weaknesses than pretend you don't have them. So true. Get inspired by nature, not by pictures of nature. Get inspired by nature, by the actual thing, not by pictures of it. Now, there's been artists, I think Taylor Swift once wrote an album about book characters, or quite a few songs about it, and that is great. But that is great because she's already felt that in person. And I think we are so obsessed at the moment with detachment, and I'm not even against detachment. I think a detachment sometimes can serve art. Very rarely, but it sometimes can. But you need to care, you need to see, you need to feel, you need to actually know what you're talking about. And does that mean you'll get hurt, you'll be sad, you'll cry sometimes? Yes. You're like, I thought this was an art class, why is she telling me to cry? No, it's not, I'm not. The avoiding of crying is detrimental. The seeking of crying is detrimental. But living life and going for things, and you might cry, you might not, is life. What are you doing this for? You're just spinning around, having the earth spin around the sun and doing nothing while it does that? What is it for? Emotions is the colors of life. Otherwise, you're in black and white movies without sound. Don't create and consume at the same time. Caveat, don't pressure yourself to consume and create at the same time. What does that mean? When I write books, I tend to not read very much. Funny story, I have written a book and started reading a book at the same time, separate things. And I finished writing the book, like writing it, drafting it, editing it, editing. I'm not even exaggerating. I did like so many rounds of editing. And then I finished the book, sent it off to copyright, and I was still reading the book, the other book, because I was just so in that world of creating that I couldn't consume. If you want to read, you can read. If you want to look at paintings, you can, but don't force yourself to have creation and consumption be at the same time. Don't force yourself. There's no need for it. Okay, thank you for watching, and we're gonna leave off with a really nice quote and some homework. You love homework, okay? You have never loved homework more than now. Okay, homework. The quote from the Bible, not the Bible, but art Bible, okay. It's not unusual for science to catch up to art eventually, nor is it unusual for art to catch up to the spiritual. Find 3 pieces of evidence to prove the statement. Should I read it again? Yes. Okay. It is not unusual for science to catch up to art eventually, nor is it unusual for art to catch up to spirituality. Find 3 pieces of evidence for that. Tag me on TikTok if you want to make the homework public. Thank you for watching, and round of applause. You should be so proud, and yeah, thanks for being here.